saying that there have to be some sort of limits to the freedom of expression. But here's the catch. While we all agree that there has to be freedom of speech and that comics should not be arrested because they make fun of a politician, today in Chennai, a popular YouTuber named Savukku Shankar, he had his home vandalized allegedly by Congress and DMK workers. That's the allegation that he and his mother have made. His mother was at home when this happened. He says the police have refused to register an FIR despite his aged mother going to the police station to file a complaint. The question is, isn't there an inherent double standard here? Why does freedom of expression extend only to comics who you like and not to critics who you dislike? Now, just hours before he released his new video, Kunal Kamra, in a statement put out on X, expressed his unwillingness to retract his words. He said that he's not going to apologize. He has nothing to apologize for in calling Mr. Shinde a traitor. He also said that attacking the venue, the place where this show was shot, the Habitat Center in Mumbai in Khar, for the words that a comedian used is senseless. He further went on to say that he was willing to cooperate with the police and with the courts. He said he doesn't fear the mob and that he would not be hiding under his bed. CNN News18 has also accessed the line of questioning that the Mumbai police intends for comedian Kunal Kamra. According to the Mumbai police, Kamra would be asked on who is the person who's managing his social media account. He would be also quizzed on why this video was uploaded on Sunday, even though the live performance itself happened many days ago. The police are also likely to question him on the content and the authenticity of the video. They also want answers on his track record, particularly when it comes to remarks against politicians and those in high authority. Police are also likely to question him on his track record of remarks against Hindu religious deities and Hindu followers. So the FIR against Kamra, these are the sections that have been included in that. BNS sections 353(1)(b) and 356(2). The Home Ministry there has confirmed that location tracking, and they are vowing strict action against Kunal Kamra. Remember, the BMC has demolished some parts of what they claim were illegal construction at the Habitat Studio. The Habitat Studio has put out a statement it's shutting down. The inspection of the Unicontinental Hotel, where he was staying over a complaint that has been filed there, has also happened. Some demolition has happened there as well. So clearly, the BMC, the Mumbai police, all swinging into action just a day after, or a couple of days after, Kunal Kamra put out that video on Sunday night where he criticized the Deputy Chief Minister. Let's listen into some political reactions and then we'll go across to our face-off tonight.
आपके व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता किसी दूसरे पर व्यक्तिगत प्रहार करने के लिए नहीं हो सकती है। दुर्भाग्य है कि कुछ लोगों ने देश का चीरहरण करना, विभाजन की खाई को और चौड़ी करने के लिए इस अभिव्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता को अपना जन्मसिद्ध अधिकार मान लिया है।
जो मेरे साथ हादसा किया गया था इलीगली, उसका मजाक उड़ा रहे थे, तो आई थिंक कहीं ना कहीं मैं उस हादसे को इस हादसे से बिल्कुल नहीं जोड़ूंगी, क्योंकि वो एक इलीगल था जो काम किया था। आप जो है कॉमेडी के नाम पर उनकी इज्जत उछाल रहे हैं, उनकी अपकीर्ति कर रहे हैं, उनके काम को डिसरिगार्ड कर रहे हैं। शिंदे जी जो है वो कभी किसी जमाने में रिक्शा चलाया करते थे, आज वो अपने दम पर इतना आगे आए हैं। और ये कौन, उनके खुद की क्या क्रेडेंशियल्स है, कौन है ये लोग जो कुछ जिंदगी में कर नहीं पाए।
All right, I want to go across to the political face-off tonight. China NC spokesperson of the Shinde Sena and CS Jai spokesperson of the UBT Sena. China NC, you know, it can't be the case that somebody cracks a joke about a politician and suddenly there's an FIR, you know, goons ransack the place where he performs that skit. I mean, what's in it for the venue? I mean, it's not like the people who own the venue, you know, are responsible for the content that this man puts out, as reprehensible as that content may be.
I agree with you, Zaka, in the opening statement, but let's look at the reference to context. You have a comedy. Can comedy be chosen in a vulgar display of words for a mass leader who happens to be the leader of our political party and who has risen from the ranks? I think it's a matter of pride today when I say that Eknath Shinde ji, as an auto rickshaw driver, has gone on to become the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, has gone on to become the Deputy Chief Minister, and is somebody who has worked on ground. Now, if you use words like Gaddar, which actually means traitor, and who is a traitor? I mean, is a traitor the person who has left the ideology of Adanya Balasaheb Thackeray and who is sitting in the lap of Sonia Gandhi? Or is this somebody who is pretending to be a comedian but is actually a political activist under the garb of being a puppet, or rather rent a comedian in this particular case? So now for every single action, you will have a reaction. I am not for 1 minute saying that the reaction was right. It was an emotive issue which should have been dealt with, obviously in a legal way, or on television channels like some of us do. But
Okay.
the point is that the government did take action. 12 people were arrested. And look at the track record, Zaka, of our government when Eknath Shinde was the then Chief Minister of Maharashtra. For 2.5 years, there was not one case of arrest or one warrant issued against anybody who spoke or expressed their opinions contrarian to the Ubata Sena, which you know what they did with ABP as a news channel, or Arnab Goswami, or many others. And I'm not citing this as a competition. Now come to Mr. Kamra, and this is my limited point. Somebody who has the audacity to call the Supreme Court a supreme joke, condescendingly about Justice Chandrachud, Venugopalji, Banyas. The list is endless. Arnab Goswami, your own peer. The list is endless. And this is not the first time. He is a repeat offender. And I think the time has come for him also to understand that when you speak like this, where you have no emotion, and when you make humor humiliation, there is a difference. Humor is the essence of life. Yes, conceded. Wit is something we all look up to. We've had stalwarts like R.K. Lakshman, Balasaheb Thackeray himself, Mario Miranda, many others, but they never hurt people and humiliate people in this condescending tone and tonality.
So let me ask Mr. Jha, the point that China referred to, it's not like when you were in power, Mr. Jha, you had a clean record. In May 2022, Marathi actor Ketki Chitale was held for 40 days because she put out a Facebook post criticizing Sharad Pawar. In May 2022, a pharmacy student was held for an offensive post again on Mr. Pawar. In September 2020, Shiv Sena workers thrashed a former naval officer, Mr. Madan Sharma, for sharing a cartoon on Uddhav Thackeray when he was chief minister. In September 2020, and we all know famously this, Kangana Ranaut's office in Mumbai was partially demolished after she made comments about Aditya Thackeray. I mean, the point is, it's not like you are all clear and pure when it came to criticism when you were in power.
See, when we were in power, we were the Shiv Sena all together. And at this moment, if they want to rake the past combines Mr. Eknath Shinde also. And at that moment, when the things happened, the situation demanded to be done, and it was done legally. In case of Kangana Ranaut, you see, the legal actions were taken by the BMC. And it was not us, it was the BMC who demolished the illegal portions of her house. Second thing is with regard to the Navy, retired Navy officer, he next day pronounced himself to be a part of BJP RSS, and it's on record. We are not saying anything beyond the record. And the NCP which took action against the lady, it was completely wrong because she had to spend 40 days in prison.
Jail, yeah.
And it was completely wrong. We accept we did something wrong, but we also did something right. So we don't want to wreck the past. Now the thing is that the new government is losing the patience. They don't want to hear anything against this government. And this is very clear when the situation of law and order arises with regard to Nagpur. They don't want to respond. They don't want to take severe actions against the persons. So these things come into question. These issues are important than breaking the issue with regard to Kunal Kamra, who is having a viewership less than 1 lakh, and now it has crossed crores of viewers.
But they have taken action in Nagpur against Fahim Khan. They've arrested him. In fact, even the bulldozer action that was taken yesterday, the Supreme Court has laid down guidelines for it. You may disagree with that, but you can't say no action has been taken.
No, the Nagpur clash involves a much wider spectrum because the build-up was not done in a day. It was done for 3, 4 days or past 1 week.
Okay.
And this was a larger conspiracy which they have not investigated till now.
Okay, so
Many
Shaina,
cases
respond to
might.
that. There are much bigger problems in the state. You're not able to provide that 2100 rupees to women. You are not, in Nagpur, a city like Nagpur, which has never seen communal riots, you had riots for the first time. These are the issues, the grave issues that the state should be dealing with instead of going after a comedian.
The government of the day is doing its job. When you talk about Nagpur, whether it was Fahim Khan, who was part of another big conspiracy to destabilize the most peaceful state of Maharashtra, and a city like Nagpur, which has always kept our Sanskriti and Sabhita, at the helm. It's not like the government of the day did not contain the situation or did not act. So please, let's not mix apples and oranges. I can also say that Kunal Kamra is part of a larger conspiracy to deflect from an investigation which is going on. And that could be also something which has been planted. But I don't want to get into that. Here, what are we debating, Zaka? We are debating two things. One is freedom of expression, which is the fundamental right of all. But surely vulgarity is not. Humor and humiliation. There is a fine line, but there is a definite line where you cannot humiliate my leader and expect for there not to be a reaction. Right, wrong, or otherwise, in a democracy where you have mass leaders who have emerged from the ground, there is a public support and public base too. You talk about Kunal Kamra and his followers may be virtual, ours are real. If we are a political party...
But Shaina, tell me, the word that he used, which Shiv Sena Shinde faction has taken so much exception to, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray uses the same word every day. Are you going to send your people to Matoshri also?
Firstly, who is a Gaddar? Let's get that straight. Is a Gaddar somebody who has absolutely thrown the philosophy of Adanya Hindu Hriday Samrat Balasaheb Thackeray into the dustbin and for lust for power is sitting in the lap of the most pseudo-secular vote bank for vote bank politics with the most corrupt alliance? So we are not sitting on judgment here, or I am not pronouncing. But what is the job of a comedian? Is that job of a comedian to humor people, or under the guise of being a comedian, be an actual political activist?
Mr. Jha, the point is, again, there is a stark double standard. I was just referring to this earlier on in the program. Today in Chennai, a YouTuber, much like Mr. Kamra, less a comic but more a YouTuber, his house was attacked because he says things that are not popular of the current government there. But nobody was saying, what about his freedom of expression? Why are people vandalizing his house? Nobody came to his defense. So it can't be that when comics that you like are attacked, oh, that's a freedom of expression issue. But critics who you don't like are attacked, that is not a freedom of expression issue.
See, as far as the Constitution is concerned, everybody has got a freedom of speech. Even you are sitting in your newsroom and telling everybody how to what are the news and what are the aspects of the news criticism. All these are aspects of freedom of speech. And you cannot curb a freedom of speech, but you can naturally restrain some parts of it. But if you see in this scenario, what is happening is that peculiar scenario is making the news because in 90s, if you see Jaspal Bhatti was there. In 90s, we see Shekhar Suman was there. They used to do criticism in a comical way. But eventually the politics now and then the politicians are day by day losing the patience and they are reacting to such kind of news or criticism. This is very, very, I should say that faulty politics is being going on and we should not do it. But we should always allow certain criticism because if there is no criticism, the government will not work. And eventually, the public who is doing the criticism should also be adhered to.
Zaka,
we'll leave it there. I'm running out of time, Shaina. I just want to say what the Prime Minister said in his podcast with Lex Friedman, that he welcomes criticism. He's open to criticism, but it can't just be mere allegations. Criticism has to be well researched and well defined, but we'll see how this story plays out. I just want to refer for a moment to what happened to that YouTuber in Chennai. He's a man by name Savak Shankar, very popular in the Tamil YouTube circuit. His house, he claims, was ransacked by a group of men who were dressed like sanitary workers. The group threatened his mother, his aged mother, who was at home at that time. They dumped waste on the floor, saying that Savak Shankar had made some remarks about sanitary workers in one of his videos, which had apparently hurt them. The mother went to the police station, she filed a complaint, but Mr. Shankar is alleging that the police are refusing to file an FIR basis his mother's complaint. He has also clarified that the video that he put up on his YouTube channel was about corruption, allegedly, in the purchase of new garbage collection vehicles and not against the sanitary workers. Like I said, he is alleging that the police are going slow on this investigation. Only a sub-inspector and a constable arrived at the scene despite the complaint, he alleges. The attackers staged a protest for hours without leaving the premises, and then finally, after a number of hours, they finally left.
I strongly believe that it was Mr. Sellu Perundagai, Tamil Nadu Congress Committee Chief, that targeted me, because the scam I exposed directly indicted Mr. Sellu Perundagai, and I spoke in my story that Mr. Sellu Perundagai conceived and executed this scam. So naturally, he is the person who is most aggrieved due to the exposure of that scam, and he is in a position to organize the sanitary workers, and they are not sanitary workers; they are goons organized by Mr. Sellu Perundagai, and Mr. Sellu Perundagai has in his control numerous goons like the people who came yesterday.
And so far no FIR has been registered?
Madam, as of this moment, more than 24 hours have passed after this incident. The entire incident was videographed, went on Facebook Live. The immediate action the police could have done is registered an FIR and hand over a copy to the complainant. So far, the police have not registered an FIR. This itself shows their intent and the next course of action they are going to take. And I don't have any faith in the police, because the entire attack happened with the knowledge and collusion of the police is what I believe.
He always spoke about me. Anybody will give money, he will speak. Okay, I don't bother. Okay, we will face that legally.
The other big story we're tracking, the cash at the judge's house has now reignited the debate of the National Judicial Appointments Commission, the NJAC. Rajya Sabha Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar met with floor leaders of the Rajya Sabha this evening to discuss issues related to the judiciary following the allegations that a large amount of cash was recovered from the residence of the Delhi High Court Judge, Justice Varma. Dhankar has said that the matter extends beyond just judicial concerns. It impacts the sovereignty, supremacy and the relevance of Parliament. Vice President Dhankar has highlighted the importance of upholding the legal system, as the NJAC Act was passed almost unanimously by both houses, but it was struck down by the court. Earlier today, the Congress leader Pramod Tewari sought a discussion in the Rajya Sabha regarding Justice Varma's case. Responding to this, the Rajya Sabha Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar brought up the NJAC issue once again. He questioned the Supreme Court's decision to set aside the NJAC Act, stating that there is no provision for judicial review of a constitutional amendment that's been enacted and passed by the Indian Parliament.
There is no constitutional provision of review or appeal of a constitutional amendment. If there is legislation in the country by Parliament or state, judicial review can take place. What emanated from the Indian Parliament, duly endorsed by state legislatures, sanctified by the Honorable President by appending signatures under Article 111. We are at crossroads. I strongly urge members to reflect. There can be no breach by any institution of what emanated from the Parliament, endorsed by legislatures.
So in the meeting of floor leaders that the Rajya Sabha chairperson, Mr. Dhankar, convened earlier this evening, the entire set of leaders cutting across the political spectrum have expressed their concern about what was seen recently, the pictures of cash burning at the outhouse of Justice Varma. Everyone was concerned about the kind of allegations that have come through on the judiciary. It is understood that the government will have one-on-one meetings with various opposition party floor leaders to try and build consensus on the NJAC. Leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha, Mr. Kharge, along with other opposition leaders, also said that they would like to see a discussion happen inside the House so that a consensus can be built. It's understood that JP Nadda, who's the leader of the House in the upper house, along with other ministers in the government, will do a consensus building exercise before the government even thinks about bringing in a bill on the lines of the NJAC. Payal Mehta is now joining us. So Payal, what is the government sort of reading right now? Yes, the pictures that we saw from Justice Varma's house allegedly are of deep concern. That issue needs to be addressed. Yet at the same time, are they thinking on the lines of bringing a bill similar to that of the NJAC?
Well, that looks like Zaka, what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring in a bill which is going to be similar to NJAC without calling it NJAC or discussing NJAC threadbare. Right now, today's meeting was extremely important in breaking that little bit of ice, because the Vice President had asked all the floor leaders to come. And while Mallikarjun Kharge spoke about the concern that he had about the cash being burnt at the judge's house, JP Nadda also said that they were also appraised of the matter and they also had equal concern. So everybody was on the same page as far as that is concerned. So they've decided to take this discussion further. Consensus is the way in which they want to take this forward. And therefore, JP Nadda, who's a senior leader in the BJP and also the leader of the House in the Rajya Sabha, will be leading the discussion with various political parties. Various political parties like the Congress Party and the TMC, etc., wanted to have a discussion on a one-to-one basis and not a large discussion where probably somebody doesn't get a distinctive voice. So sooner than later, this meeting will be convened and the series of meetings will be convened, after which, of course, Mr. Nadda will go back to the government and in fact tell them what his feedback really has been to take further steps. But yes, this is a concern which is being shared by all parties, irrespective of whichever side of the fence they are from.
All right, Payal, we'll leave it at that. Let's see what comes of this, whether the government actually brings in a bill similar to that of the NJAC. But let's take a look at the main differences between the current system, which has been in place for the last 50 plus years, the collegium system by which judges are appointed or removed, and what the government wanted to bring in as a reform, which is the National Judicial Appointments Commission, the NJAC. The collegium is a system that's based on 3 judges, the senior most in the Supreme Court. The NJAC is a body that was created to end the collegium system. It has representatives both from the judiciary as well as from the executive. The Supreme Court Collegium consists of the Chief Justice of India as well as the 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. You have a collegium in the High Court as well, which has the Chief Justice of that particular High Court plus the 2 senior most judges. The NJAC had 6 members, which is the CJI, who's the chairperson, the 2 senior most Supreme Court judges, and then 3 other members, one of whom would be the Union Law Minister, and 2 other eminent persons, one nominated by the CJI, Prime Minister and the LOP, and the other nominated from the SC, ST, OBC minority communities. The collegium has no constitutional backing. It's based on a judicial interpretation of Articles 124 and 217 and preserving the basic structure of the Constitution. The NJAC was introduced through a constitutional amendment, Article 124A, and the NJAC Act of 2014, which was the following year struck down by a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court. The collegium recommends the names of judges who are to be elevated to the High Court or the Supreme Court to the President. The government can object, but if the collegium insists, then the government is bound by the collegium's decision. The government's role is limited in getting an inquiry conducted by the Intelligence Bureau if a person is to be elevated as a judge either in the High Court or in the Supreme Court. NJAC would recommend names to the President. Any 2 members out of the committee of 6 could veto a proposal which ensured consensus. The role of the executive is limited to raising objections or seeking clarifications. It cannot reject outright if the collegium insists on a particular name. On the NJAC, though, there would be significant involvement of the executive, A, via the Union Law Minister, and the other 2 nominated members. The fear was that they could be influenced too, to a great degree, by the executive. So then, why did, despite the fact that the NJAC Act was passed nearly unanimously in both houses of Parliament, why did the Supreme Court strike it down the very next year? The top court said it undermines the independence of the judiciary. It said it violates the basic structure of the Constitution, which was first upheld in the Keshwanand Bharati case in 1971. The court, in its order in 2015, argued that the NJAC encouraged the executive to have a role, a say in the appointment of judges. The top court further contended that independence of judiciary is non-negotiable. The court also said in its order that NJAC had no transparency in the appointment of judges. So let's try and put that to test. And given what we've seen, allegedly at the residence of Justice Varma. Is the need for NJAC coming back to the fore again? Pinky Anand is senior advocate, former additional solicitor general. Your first comments on what you saw, the cash haul controversy, the cash burning there at Justice Varma's residence, his defense so far, the investigation that's been put forth by the Supreme Court. Is it commensurate? Is it in line as per expectations, or do you feel more can and needs to be done?
See, I don't think I'm sitting here to do a mini trial, and I really don't want to comment about what I think at this point of time. It is too premature. I do think that a lot of the actions need to be questioned for the reason that you have, ultimately this seems to be conviction without trial. At the end of the day, what happens, we don't know. That can only happen when there is either the inquiry sustains itself or some other mechanism comes into place. And I think that is the mechanism that is being proposed, that there should be an adequate mechanism to see what is going on. So to decide on the prejudge is something which I'm afraid I don't subscribe to. If indeed it is found that there is nothing wrong with what happened and the person concerned is not guilty in any fashion, then what happens? So I think I go purely for the rule of law, and we must be sure that things are the way they are expressed to be before we decide whether that is appropriate punishment or not appropriate punishment. There is no such punishment issue at this point of time, which should have happened in any case. There are steps, of course, that are considered to be taken, but really I think this whole system needs an overhaul.
But tell me, Ms. Anand, the judicial accountability debate is back in fore. We've seen, the meeting that the Vice President has had. Various political parties have expressed their opinion. There is now a concerted feeling that there needs to be reform in the appointment and the removal of judges. NJAC was a step in that direction. The court struck it down. Do you believe that this is the direction in which we should be moving, that there should be some form of a National Judicial Appointments Commission where it's not just the judiciary alone which has a say on who gets appointed as judges, but also the executive as well as other eminent persons who should have a say?
Obviously, there is high time that we consider these mechanisms. See, this is ultimately for the purity of administration. And as some of us say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you have a process in place which can neutrally go into the subject and decide what is right and what is wrong, then there are no such ad hoc actions taken which are questioned in any case. And you need to come to a certainty. We need to have certainty as far as the process is concerned. We must have a process in place. It cannot be that if somebody is guilty, he goes away scot-free, or if he's not guilty and he's actually innocent, you convict him. So where do we go from there? NJAC actually was a solution which came up, and of course, it was by unanimity. It was ultimately one of the first times a constitutional amendment came up by unanimity. It was struck down by the Supreme Court. Obviously, this is a power struggle of sorts. It came up for review. I was, in fact, the amicus appointed in the review matter, in the NJAC matter. And there, certain proposals are made, some of which were taken up, some of which went into oblivion. So at the end of the day, it was even in the NJAC judgment, everybody said that there is a problem with the system. So that is why, in fact, the review or the clarification came up, but it went to nothing. So when we are at this point of time, we are struggling with, for example, the issues of appointment of seniors, having a mechanism in place to assess, to decide merit, to decide suitability, to decide eligibility. That also is in question again. We need to put institutional processes in place so that we can ensure that the process works to the advantage of everybody and not against the interest of one or two.
But ma'am, like I said, this debate that's now raging, whether the collegium system is opaque, whether it needs reform, and clearly in light of the pictures that we saw, there is this growing sort of resonance that we need to get NJC back in some form or fashion. Certainly the political class cutting across the political divide is feeling that. The question then is, can the courts continue to take refuge behind the fact that, executive should not have a say in how judges are appointed?
I cannot say at this point of time the way it will emerge out. The attempt was to make NJAC a fairly comprehensive body, well balanced, so that it actually balances all. But history has shown that the struggle on this is the power struggle between the executive and the judiciary. And ultimately, as we all know, history has shown that the judiciary has taken up onto itself to decide what to do and what not to do. It wasn't really by way of the direct constitution. It remained with the executive. So we do have to find a balance at all times with NJAC so that it works without being at least unbalanced one way or the other. Both have a role to play, there's no question about that. But the extent of role, I'm afraid, has to be really sat down and figured out.
All right, Pinky Anand, former Additional Solicitor General, thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us here on Brass Tacks. Talking about the Justice Varma case, today the three-member Supreme Court appointed committee began its inquiry into the conduct of Delhi High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Varma. They visited his residence this afternoon. They reportedly even spoke with the judge concerned. The three-member committee, comprising Chief Justice of Punjab and Haryana High Court Justice Sheel Nagu, Chief Justice of the Himachal Pradesh High Court Justice G.S. Sandhalia, and Justice Anu Shivaraman of the Karnataka High Court, were at Justice Varma's residence for about 45 minutes. Like I said, the judge was reportedly at home when the three judges committee appeared there. They also had a brief word with him, is what we're given to understand. The Supreme Court's three-member panel probing the Justice Varma case will be questioning also the Fire Service Department personnel, the first responders. They will also be checking the call records of the judge very soon. The first responders, both from the fire department as well as from the police, who went to the storeroom, they will be questioned as well. The probe will basically focus on the sequence of events on the night of March 14th, which is when the fire was reported. The authenticity of the burnt cash video will be probed as well. Forensic teams may be roped in for the investigation. The probe is on what are seemingly contradictory remarks by what the cops and the fire brigade have said on the one side and what the judge is claiming on the other. The fire chief also put out a statement that the cash recovery did not happen, and then the video contradicted that. Judge Varma's call records will be investigated as well, is what we're given to understand. But here's the other difficult situation as far as Justice Varma is concerned, because he was repatriated to the Allahabad High Court, his parent court, but the Bar Association there has launched an indefinite strike starting today to protest against the repatriation of Justice Varma from Delhi to Allahabad. The Bar Association has urged the central government to reject the collegium's recommendation and also announced the closure of the Photo Affidavit Centre from the 26th of March, preventing the filing of fresh cases. The transfer follows the discovery of unaccounted cash at the outhouse of Justice Varma. The High Court Bar Association has demanded a review of all judgments delivered by Justice Varma in the time that he was there in the Allahabad High Court, as well as his time as judge in the Delhi High Court. Immediate impeachment proceedings against Justice Varma is also another demand of the Allahabad High Court Bar Association. They also want a CBI and an ED probe into the source of funds that were allegedly discovered at his outhouse. Reforms to make the impeachment process quick, easy and transparent, including civil society participation. These are all their list of demands. They have said they will not allow Justice Varma to be repatriated back to his parent court. Neither will they allow him to sit in on any of the benches or be assigned any work.
हम अपने को क्लैरिफाई करना चाहते हैं कि हम ये लड़ाई किसी जज के खिलाफ नहीं लड़ रहे, हम सिस्टम के खिलाफ लड़ रहे हैं। हमारी ये लड़ाई इसलिए हो रही है कि मेरे यहाँ जो हार्ड वर्किंग ऑनेस्ट जजेस हैं, आज उनकी छवि खतरे में पड़ी हुई है। इलाहाबाद हाई कोर्ट को डंपिंग ग्राउंड समझ लिया है। जो भी होगा उसको आप यहीं करप्शन के चार्ज पे कहीं कोई जज को ट्रांसफर किया किसी डाउट पे, तो इलाहाबाद इज ए हाई कोर्ट, वहां ट्रांसफर कर। सुप्रीम कोर्ट को पता है कि इलाहाबाद की सिचुएशन क्या है, तो उसका डिफेक्ट रिमूव करने का प्रयास होना चाहिए। उसमें फर्दर डिफेक्टिव लोगों को आप डालेंगे तो सिस्टम कोलैप्स कर जाएगा।
All right, let's move on to Karnataka, where Minister K.N. Rajanna has submitted a 3-page complaint to the Home Minister G. Parameshwara over the honey trap row. Minister K.N. Rajanna has submitted this 3-page complaint. Home Minister Parameshwara has said that a probe will be ordered after consulting the Chief Minister. Opposition leader R. Ashok, meanwhile, has alleged government involvement in phone tapping. He claims that several opposition leaders, including himself, HDK, who is a former Chief Minister, currently a Cabinet Minister in the centre, as well as Minister K.N. Rajanna in the Siddaramaiah government, and his MLC son, Rajendra Rajanna, have all had their phones tapped. He further claimed that this has been going on for a number of years. In response, Home Minister Parameshwara has said that no complaint in this regard had ever come from any party or any leaders, and there was no proof of any such attempts yet. Minister N. Swamy has also countered Ashok's allegations, saying that these were blank shots fired in the air and that these were baseless claims being made by the leader of the opposition.
ಹುಡುಗ ಬಂದಿದ್ದವನು ಎರಡು ಸರಿ ಬಂದಾಗಲೂ ಅವನೇ ಕಾಮನ್, ಎರಡು ಸರಿ ಬಂದಾಗ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ.
ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು ಕೋಟ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿರ
ಲಾಯರ್ ಟೈಪ್ ಅಂತ ಕೋಟ್ ಗಿಟ್ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ, ಅವರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಜೀನ್ಸು ಒಂದು ಬ್ಲೂ ಇದ್ರದ್ದು ಟಾಪ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರು. ಎರಡನೇ ಸರಿ ಬಂದವರು ನಾನು ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಲಾಯರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರು. ಬರ್ದಿದ್ದೇನಪ್ಪ ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಲಾಯರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು?
ಅಲ್ಲ, ಲೇಡಿನ ಸರ್,
ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಲಾಯರ್ ಅಂತ ಲೇಡಿ ಬರ್ದಿದ್ದಲ್ವೇನು
ಸರ್? ಎರಡು ಟೈಮು ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಲಾಯರ್ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ.
ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ವಕೀಲ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ,
ಲಾಯರ್ ಅಂತ,
ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಲಾಯರ್.
ಇವತ್ತು ಆಡಳಿತ ಪಕ್ಷದ ಒಬ್ಬ ಶಾಸಕನೇ ಆಪಾದನೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಫೋನ್ ಕದ್ದಾಲಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ, ಕುಮಾರಸ್ವಾಮಿ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. 3 ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಸ್ವತಃ ಆಡಳಿತ ಪಕ್ಷದ ಶಾಸಕರೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಫೋನ್ ಕದ್ದಾಲಿಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಇದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ದಾಖಲೆ ಇನ್ನೇನು ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು? 100% ಈ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ರಾಜಕೀಯವಾಗಿ ಬಗ್ಬಡಿಬೇಕು ಅವರ ವಿರೋಧಿಗಳನ್ನ ಅಂತೇಳಿ, ಆಡಳಿತ ಪಕ್ಷ ಇರಲಿ ವಿರೋಧ ಪಕ್ಷ ಇರಲಿ ಯಾರೇ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವರ ಫೋನ್ ಕದ್ದಾಲಿಕೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಸತ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಾತನ್ನು ನಾನು ಅವರ ಹೇಳಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಮರ್ಥನೆಯನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. 100% ಡೌಟೇ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಬೇಡಿ, 100% ಎಲ್ಲರದು, ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿರೋಧ ಪಕ್ಷದವರು ಫೋನ್ ಟ್ಯಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದೊಂದು ಜಾಲನೇ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
We have not received any complaints, nor even a representation to me or to the Chief Minister. So without anything, somebody makes a statement, it cannot be taken into cognizance. I also saw in the media, leader of the opposition, Shri Ashok, has also made a statement. Ashok is a responsible opposition leader. But I also verified with our department, there is nothing so far as a complaint.
All right, the U.S. trade delegation is in New Delhi till the 28th of March for trade talks ahead of the reciprocal tariffs kicking in from the 2nd of April. China, Canada and Mexico have responded to the Trump threat of tariffs. The U.S. has also warned of 25% tariffs on countries that are importing crude oil from Venezuela. India too imports some degree of oil from Venezuela. India and the US are hoping to increase bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030, as was announced by the Prime Minister. They're hoping to sign a bilateral trade agreement within the calendar year of 2025 itself. Government sources on the visit of the US trade delegation, led by Assistant Trade Representative to New Delhi for trade talks. India and US will be finalizing the contours, the negotiation schedule and the terms of reference for the proposed bilateral trade agreement, the BTA. The BTA will be finalized in 2 tranches. The first phase expected to focus on goods and the second on services. Need to look at each other's strengths, weaknesses and sensitivities while trying to find common ground. More clarity is expected by the end of the week. The current talks are not the first round of negotiations, insists the Indian side. Proposed BTA will bring more predictability in tariffs and regulation. The BTA is expected to create synergy for two-way trade and investment. The US has sought greater market access in certain industrial goods, automobiles, wines and agriculture. India may seek duty cuts in labor-intensive sectors like textiles. Separately, ahead of the delegation's visit, Reuters is reporting that India is willing to concede duties or lower duties in those areas which will affect about $23 billion of US imports into India. Now, Trump has famously called tariffs the most beautiful word in the dictionary and that April 2nd would be America's Liberation Day. He's wasted no time in targeting many of America's major trading partners, including India. Hence, it's going to be a tightrope walk for India to navigate this new trade environment. High tariffs on specific items, it's not unique just to India. In fact, India's average tariff on US goods is about 17%. It is lower than some other countries, but it is higher than some others as well. India is open to reducing tariffs through this free trade agreement or the bilateral trade agreement, which both sides are hoping to sign by the fall. India's tariffs are widespread and they fit into a global pattern. They're very much within the WTO framework. High tariffs are part of a broader economic strategy to protect local industry and local agriculture, more importantly. Let's take a look at the trade between India and the United States and the US trade deficit which Trump seems to have a lot of problem with. Under Trump in 2017, in the first Trump term, the trade deficit was $22.9 billion. In 2018, it reduced a bit, $21.1 billion. In 2019, it went up to $23.7 billion. In 2019, again, it was around that same level at $23.7 billion. In 2020, it went up to $24 billion. Under 4 years of Biden, it suddenly went up. The trade deficit was $33.5 billion in 2021, $38.6 in 2022, $43.3 in 2023, and in 2024, it stood at a record of $45.7 billion, which is Trump's pet peeve. Now, the trade relationship between India and the US continues to grow. Total trade in 2024 reached $129 billion. India maintains a trade surplus, with US imports from India exceeding the exports of American goods into India. The trade relationship between India and the US continues to grow. Like I said, total trade was $129 billion. The United States exported goods worth $41 billion to India in 2024. It covered sectors like minerals, fuels, machinery, and aircraft parts. India's exports to the US stood at $87.4 billion, driven largely by pharmaceuticals, gems and jewelry, textiles, and refined petroleum. India exporting far more to the US than the other way around. The trade deficit for America, from America's point of view, stands at $45.7 billion. The United States happens to be one of India's top trading partners, playing a crucial role in commodities and high-value goods. In 23-24, the US exported a diverse range of products to India, including minerals, fuels, machinery, aircraft, and precious metals. These exports contribute significantly to bilateral trade and strengthens economic ties between both countries. The US is a crucial supplier of mineral fuels, including crude oil and LNG, to India. With an export value of about $14 billion, it plays a key role in energy trade relationship. The tariff on these imports remains relatively low. India is a significant importer of precious stones and metals from the US. The current export value is a little over $7.5 billion. Tariffs depend on the specific type of metal or gemstone. Machinery exports from the US to India form a crucial part of the trade relationship, an export value of $5.5 billion. The tariff ranges between 7.5% and 10%. The aerospace sector remains a vital area of US-India trade. Aircraft and aircraft parts valued at $3.2 billion. The tariff stands at 5%.
An American delegation is in New Delhi till the 28th of March for trade talks between both the countries. This comes after India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal have already visited the US. The discourse around tariff wars and threats of reciprocal tariffs is also turning shriller, with China, Canada and Mexico responding hawkishly to the American threats. Recently, the US had also warned of 25% tariffs on countries importing crude oil from Venezuela, which may include countries like China and India. Meanwhile, India and the US aim to increase their bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030 by signing a bilateral trade agreement, or a BTA, within 2025 itself. Here is a roundup of what is there on the agenda and how India is placed like. In the current visit of the American delegation to India, both the sides are going to finalize the contours, the negotiation schedule and the terms of reference of the proposed BTA between both the countries. It is likely to be finalized in two tranches, with the first phase expected to focus on issues pertaining to goods trade. This is not the first round of negotiations, but what we have learned so far is that the US has sought greater market access in certain industrial goods, automobiles, wines and agriculture, whereas India may seek duty cuts in labor-intensive sectors like textiles. Both the countries are expected to look at each other's sensitivities while trying to find a common ground to create synergy for two-way trade and investments, as well as predictability in tariffs, regulations and economic integration. More clarity is expected on these talks by the end of this week, as both the sides sit on the negotiation table to begin charting out the contours. As on date, reciprocal tariffs have not been applied by the US on India. Both the countries plan to negotiate a mutually beneficial multi-sector BTA to enhance and broaden bilateral trade ties. As per the government data which has been submitted in Parliament, India's simple average tariff rate is 17% and the simple average agricultural tariff was 39% and 13.5% for industrial goods in 2023. However, effective tariff rates were much lower due to several notifications issued by the government. Also, post the Union Budget 25-26, the industrial tariff had reduced to 10.6%. Tariffs or import duties are usually applied to check dumping and to protect local industry and jobs. Also, India has traditionally kept sectors like dairy and agriculture outside the ambit of trade deals to protect the interests of small and marginal farmers in comparison to industrial scale imports and competition. However, the US till now has been keen on negotiating on all aspects of trade, which will also include dairy and agriculture. While the US has indicated that reciprocal tariffs will kick in from the 2nd of April onwards, India's Commerce Ministry has maintained that the trade investigation, which usually leads to such reciprocal tariffs, is likely to go on till the 1st of April, which means that imposition of reciprocal tariffs may not begin immediately. Also, India is in midst of assessing the positives and negatives as far as the impact of US tariffs is concerned, as tariffs on many other countries may also come as an opportunity for Indian exporters. As India is engaged in stakeholder consultation, the Commerce Ministry has maintained that it is going to take an appropriate action at the right time to help Indian exporters reap benefits from the trade agreement. It remains to be seen how early the contours are going to be drawn out between both the countries and how early the negotiations are going to begin. That is something which remains to be seen. Also, several international developments which are taking place about the threat of tariffs, the threat of reciprocal tariffs, are also likely to have some degree of impact on the trade investigation which is happening and also on the future trade talks.
The recent escalation of attacks on Israel by Iran-backed proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, has placed Israel once again at a multi-front war. These coordinated campaigns, which include missile strikes very close to Tel Aviv, renewed hostilities in Gaza, and simmering tension along the Lebanese border, underscore the growing regional volatility and the challenges that Israeli security faces after the collapse of the ceasefire with Hamas. Last week, the Houthis launched a ballistic missile towards the Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv. Fortunately, it was intercepted by Israel's air defense systems before it crossed over into Israeli territory. This marked the second such attempt by the Houthis in a week, following another attack just a day earlier involving 2 missiles. The Houthis have explicitly warned that the Ben Gurion airport will remain dangerous for air traffic until Israel ends its Gaza offensive and lifts the blockade there. The Houthis possess medium-range ballistic missiles, which are estimated to be in the range of 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, which are entirely capable of reaching Israel if they are fired from Yemen. Their accuracy and their consistency, though, are doubtful, particularly because most of them have been intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense systems. Their repeated targeting of the Ben Gurion airport, which is a critical civilian and economic transport hub, demonstrates both intent as well as evolving military capability by the Houthis. While Israel's defenses, the Arrow 3 and the Iron Dome systems, have neutralized these threats so far, a successful strike could disrupt global air travel and it could inflict mass casualties. Something that would be a catastrophe for Israel, particularly with its ongoing war right now having been renewed against Hamas in Gaza. Simultaneously, the Houthis are continuing to attack commercial and military vessels in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. Since October of 2023, right after the Hamas terror attack, the Houthis have executed over 100 maritime strikes. They have sunk 2 ships, they've damaged dozens of others. Their tactics now include using ballistic and cruise missiles, the use of sea drones, which are like these unmanned explosive boats, which are cheap but very, very effective in damaging a very important commercial sea lane, as well as direct hijackings like what they did with the hijacking of the ship MV Galaxy Leader back in November of 2023. The crew of that ship were held in captivity for 15 months and they were released only after intervention by Oman. The Houthi group has also established a de facto toll system. They extort fees from shipping companies for safe passage and they blockade vessels that have any links or are flagged by either Israel, the United States or the UK. These actions have diverted about 30% of global container traffic to longer routes around Africa, and that has raised shipping costs by about 40%, and it has thereby destabilized global supply chains. But Israel is being pounded by renewed attacks after the fragile truce with Hamas, which was in place since January of 2025, collapsed last week. Israeli airstrikes killed over 400 Palestinians in Gaza. Hamas has retaliated to that by firing rockets into southern Israel. It is the first such set of attacks that happened since the ceasefire began. The Ministry of Health in Gaza says more than 50,000 have died since this war began 16 months ago. The temporary ceasefire fell through because Hamas refused Israel's demand to release the remaining hostages without the guarantee of a permanent ceasefire. The IDF announced a partial buffer zone in central Gaza, which was a clear signal that it plans for a prolonged occupation. In fact, the Defense Minister, Israel Katz, even said that the forces could temporarily occupy Gaza to get Hamas to relinquish weapons. With Gaza's death toll now surpassing 50,000, Hamas is seeking to rally regional support by portraying itself as the defender of Palestinian rights and Palestinian civilians. On Israel's northern border, clashes with Hezbollah have diminished, but they have not ceased entirely following a tentative ceasefire. But they have now restarted again over the weekend after the collapse of what was a ceasefire which lasted for a number of months. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, which fired over 3,000 rockets into Israel during the initial months after the war in Gaza began, retains an arsenal of over 100,000 precision-guided missiles. Now, while both sides want to avoid large-scale engagements, localized skirmishes continue to persist, like what we saw this weekend. Hezbollah is signaling that it can resume full hostilities if the Gaza war intensifies. The Lebanese army so far has been unsuccessful in pushing Hezbollah north of the Litani River, which they were supposed to do as per the ceasefire agreement. The synchronized attacks by the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah highlight Iran's axis of resistance, which aims to stretch Israeli defenses across multiple fronts. Iran provides the Houthis with missile components and drone technology. The Houthi proxies then time and again make their strikes to maximize psychological impact. It's timed in a way. For example, the Houthi missile launches that happened last week happened during the latest round of US-Israeli diplomatic meetings in order to put pressure on those meetings. Tehran is using these groups to pressurize Western governments, particularly America, into giving it concessions on sanctions as well as increasing its regional influence. So how is Israel likely to respond to these latest provocations? The IDF has already conducted cross-border raids into Yemen, targeting missile depots. Expect increased collaboration with the US Central Command for intelligence sharing. President Trump has reversed a temporary pause on airstrikes against the Houthis, which was imposed by the previous Biden administration. Last week's airstrikes by America killed more than 50 Houthis, which is according to a statement that's been put out by the Pentagon. Israel will also lobby for stricter UN sanctions on Tehran's missile program, even though Russia and China could potentially veto this. President Trump is also keen to revive the old nuclear deal with Iran, which he appended during his first term. The convergence of Houthi missile campaigns, Hamas's guerrilla tactics, and Hezbollah's rocket attacks have left Israel encircled by enemies who are using asymmetric tactics. The sheer geographic spread of these attacks risks overwhelming Israeli defenses. The coming weeks could either see a negotiated de-escalation, which is predicated on the ceasefire in Gaza returning, as well as maritime security deals, or we could go in the opposite direction. There could be a bigger regional war, which will inevitably draw in American and European navies in the region.
You can be sure the committee, House and Senate, will be looking into this.
Calls for answers are growing after cabinet members allegedly texted about U.S. military plans on an app. Editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, says he was mistakenly added to the group chat on Signal. That's an encrypted app, but it's not considered a secure government channel. Goldberg says the group was planning this month's U.S. military strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen.
When I'm sitting in a Safeway parking lot watching my phone, realizing, oh my God, this might be real. I think Pete Hegseth just sent this group actual targeting information, actual sequencing of an attack.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth denies sending war plans, but the Trump administration has acknowledged the messages seem to be authentic. Several officials say the White House views the incident as a major error.
I was shocked.
The Atlantic says Mike Waltz convened the chat. He's the national security advisor, a role John Bolton held in the first Trump administration.
So let's forget the classification issue. How can you conduct official government business over a non-official channel?
The Espionage Act makes it a crime to mishandle classified information. Democrats are demanding an investigation, and some Republicans are calling for accountability.
It's a security violation, and there's no doubt that Russia and China saw this stuff.
I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
You win.
Mr. President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
Your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence, we will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
The NSC said it was authentic.
It's not, again, certainly not commenting on any particular filing or any particular case. If you lie in your efforts to come to the United States to get a visa for any reason, or for a green card, maybe there haven't been repercussions or we haven't done things properly in the past. A lot of things have changed with the election of Donald Trump, as the American people have said. What has happened in the past is now unacceptable. We see the impact on people's lives.
Viewers, what a day it is turning out to be. Parliament today saw the Vice President or the Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha call for an all-party meeting to discuss how to restore public trust in the judiciary. On the streets, among lay people, the opinion is that the judiciary is above account and works behind a cloak of secrecy. In the legal fraternity, viewers, even in the legal fraternity, the disquiet is erupting into a veritable revolt, with the Allahabad